Who are you? What are you staring at?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to stare, but I only thought...
Oh, you did it. Well, what are you doing here?
I was only walking.
Well, get on with your walking. Don't hang about here screaming.
If you love listening to this show, please consider giving a rating and a review on Amazon Alexa or wherever you listen. We want to continue bringing you this amazing content, and part of our ability to do that means that we need a big audience. Now, it may not seem like much, but rating and reviewing the show will help more people find us, just like how you found this show. Simply on any podcast platform, search for a show, scroll down to the bottom, and push 5 stars. It's that easy. Thanks for supporting the show. So today I am joined by Marco Antonio Soriano, the fourth, who is a partner and chief investment officer at the Soriano Group family office. Welcome to the show today.
Thank you. How are you guys?
All right. Well, let's start with something that most people may not know. You were admitted to the Cornell Medical School. Is that right? Tell us about that.
That's old. Yeah, you did your research. I was on a path to become a medical doctor from NYU, got admitted to the medical school. I did a year and a half, decided that it wasn't for me the right fit.
And you have instead directed your career towards what?
Basically finance and international relationships. During that time that I was at the medical school, I had a chance to meet loads of people from the World Bank, the IMF, and the United Nations. So it's sort of called for me. And I became an associate to the World Bank and started my whole financial career basically there.
Amazing. Now, for those of you that are listening or not familiar with Marco, he is a fourth generation family office, a part of the Soriano family legacy. I wonder if you could give us just a few minute kind of a brief historical overview of the family legacy.
Well, the family has various branches. It started off with my great-grandfather, who was a prominent banker during the 1800s, 1850s, 1860s. Those times were out of Spain, when Spain was still considered a superpower in the world. And towards the end of that century is when they started losing the time what were colonies. Today, these are the emerging markets. In any case, he was also a politician, a senator for almost 40 years of his life, and started a big career in the hospitality sector. That was his starting point in business. And then he moved on to my grandfather, who him and his siblings created multiple enterprises. One of them was a Soriano brand that you are aware of, with the motorcycles, the racing of cars, predating Formula One, aviation. He worked with Charles de Lambert, who was one of the students of the Wright brothers, Dumont Santos, and created engines for the planes at the time that were the very first ones. The other branches of the family created the Soriano Corporation, which was the famous San Miguel brewery in the world, still around, and we were also founders of that. The generation today, my fourth generation, is trying to revamp, doing the rebirth, continuing the business as such, and hoping to continue building on the empire, if you want to put it that way.
Well, that's a beautiful recap. And again, these are very different sectors. I mean, from banking to motorsports to other forms of transportation, as well as just, I think you guys are also holding high fashion as well, right? So if you could give us a kind of a more comprehensive view of the current holding group in terms of the kinds of businesses and sectors that you guys are active in.
Sure. So when I took office in 2009, which was right during the economic downturn that we had globally, I was brought in as a CIO. I am today the chairman as well of the board, representing this fourth generation. What I have devised is a well-diversified portfolio of investments in alternatives as well as public markets. In those alternatives, we're looking at everything that is trending today, the paradigms of today's and the next decade, right? So we're looking at electric vehicles, we're looking at AI, blockchain, cryptocurrencies, robotics, we're looking at space economy, we're looking at a whole array of cutting edge disruptors in the market. And this is where we're allocating a significant time and money of our own.
Very interesting. And I wonder, and I guess this is a bigger question, which is, as you are starting to take the helm of this holding group, where and how are you looking to pivot the direction of your generation as well as the next generation?
Well, pivoting to teach the next generation, which is 9 children right now that go from 14 down to 1 years of age. We're right now showing them the ropes, sort of say, and where they are learning about all the different businesses that we own today, what was done in the past, and hopefully teach them not to make the same mistakes, right? So how we do that? We install within our family's offices and businesses mentorship programs where the children, not only our children of the family, but also the children of the directors and executives of our company get exposure to learning about how to continue the business for the next generation, should that be the interest that they follow. So it's fun. So, part of it is showing them the disciplines, and the other part is showing them the legacy and why that is so important to us as a family office today.
So there's a lot behind that, right? So I think because you're in a very unusual situation of having essentially almost a couple of 100 years of legacy, is that there's a lot of learnings, right? So learnings, but also certain values and principles that's passed down. So are there some things that you can kind of call out that uniquely that you think, if these are the core principles or values that I have to pass on to the next generation, this is what it is, as well as here are the lessons that they need to avoid because myself or prior generation have learned it the hard way.
Sure. So there are 3 words that we're currently using as a slogan to our approach: elegance, innovation, tradition. And I elaborate on this. The traditional part comes with the legacy already, right? The history, the provenance, and everything that has been done. That's already done. It's in the past. How do you move forward from today and build a future? Well, you look at innovation. Innovation is something that we had always been a part of as pioneers or that predates some of the biggest companies today. And I try to teach the scope of how to become entrepreneurial, but at the same time, how to learn how to relinquish power to others, which is based solely on trust. And elegance, I think everything that we have to do, that we should do today, or we must do, must be done with elegance. And that's a big part of, including the fashion that you mentioned, our lifestyle, every component of every vertical that we've got has to have elegance with it, beauty. And I try and teach the best possible ways you can imagine to our children for that.
So if I could kind of drill down a little bit more on the elegance side, for example, again, I think at face level, we're not just talking about the external appearance per se, but there's kind of a multifaceted aspects of what is considered elegant or aesthetic. Is that right? And can you give us a little? You may also like our quarterly Astor Perkins event that brings some of the most notable experts and category leading startups in their area of sustainability and human survival on Earth and in space. To register, visit astorperkins.com/events.
Absolutely not. You're absolutely right. So we're talking about the inner core of how to deal with people, how to treat people the same way you must be treated. These are core moral values that are taught down from our parents through every next generation. I think today you see a little bit of too much. Freedom is currently mixed up with I can do whatever I want, I can say whatever I want, and that's no longer the case. So being elegant is being respectful for others and also learning from those people that work for you, that you work with every day.
You mentioned a very important word, which is trust. And I think, again, that also has a lot of, I think, multidimensional aspects as well. I want to explore the trust from the perspective of, let's say, you yourself having to have had to earn your trust into, getting to the position that you're in today, but also for the next generation in terms of how they can earn their trust and show evidence that they are capable of taking on different sets of responsibilities.
Yeah. So trust comes in different facets, just like you said. I guess in my position, in my case, I never wanted to truly join my family business. So I got to be honest with you. Part of it was seeing all the drama sometimes within my own family, and I didn't like it. And then finally, when I got to a certain age, which was the age when I became a father, past my 30s, I started maturing the idea that I could do better. And I can do better for my family, and I can do better for my friends, and I can do better for our employees, and so on. And that's kind of what transitioned me to where I am. When I say the word trust to others, when you relinquish the power, is because most of the time we think we can wear all of these hats, and we stress our lives and impacts everybody else's around us. So we need to learn how to trust people. We need to learn how to relinquish the power. We need to really allow the business to flow and run on its own, so that you can enjoy your life with your family, because they could suffer the most. So trust is a huge part of our core values as well, within the company, within the family.
Yeah, this is actually very interesting. Earlier today, we were having a conversation with Dylan Taylor, who's taking his company public, Voyager Space Holdings. And we were talking about the way he is organizing and structuring and managing the companies that he acquires and integrates into his holding group. So what you're referring to is this notion of, instead of centralizing and really having operational role in every lines of business, is the ability to be able to identify the best skill and fit, and then give them the autonomy and empower them to have that independence to do what they do best, right? And then to that point, at some point, as a family office, in order to scale, it becomes almost absolutely necessary to have to learn to trust, versus those that, I think, try to hold on too tight. It becomes harder and harder to scale, at least efficiently anyways.
It is, and it's stressful. It is stressful, and then that stress really transpires onto your personal life, and it can really damage your personal life. So the way I like to find talent, because you mentioned that, and it's very important. There are multiple companies around the world, small, medium-sized companies, that are doing their thing, let's just call it that way, in different facets, right? You can call design, engineering, and so on. Well, you can work with those companies. You can work with those companies by independently creating these silos within your corporate structure, so that you work with them as a group. Now, that doesn't mean I own the company that I hire. That doesn't mean anything of the sort. But what it does mean is that you inherently take them into your core business, and it becomes you. So all of a sudden, you become, from being a small 10 people company to having 200-300 people, hence also reducing the cost of managing, the capital cost of managing such operations.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting structure because you use the word silo, and I think with that, I think at least the more favorable characteristics of silo is this notion of specialization. So I think sometimes when we try to have resources, internal resources that try to be everything to everybody and every sector, it starts to kind of muddle it. But here, what you're talking about, these small groups of specialists that focuses, let's say, just on fashion or just on electrification of cars, motorcycle, drones, for instance, or machinery, and so forth. So how does that give you an advantage relative to others of, let's say, similar size or similar kinds of, general makeup of a family business?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think the quality control on whatever you're building, whatever you're manufacturing, whatever you're producing or distributing becomes easier, less cost expensive, when you're comparing yourself to a big company that has got, I don't know, 10,000, 20,000 employees. There is no quality control. And some of the biggest brands that we've seen today have always every year to make recalls on their vehicles, right? I'm not going to drop any brand names here, but I'm sure you have experienced that because it happens often. And that's part of becoming way too big and not being able to manage quality control, not being able to manage all of those employees. It's almost impossible. So working with the silos, allowing and delegating to each one of those silos that they all have their own directors to do the managing for you works more efficiently. And quality control is even better because now you know who did what at which point of time.
Now, we're going to take this conversation a little bit further in the context of global supply chain and manufacturing. So I think the 90s and of course the 2000s, we've seen a massive globalization and sourcing from different parts of the world, every part of the world, really. But we've also seen how in a COVID context, how that's been very problematic. And to your point, sometimes in the haste to chase after low cost, whether it's outsourcing to China or to Southeast Asia, for instance, we've started to compromise not only on quality, but the availability of certain components or certain finished products. Can you talk about quality as a hallmark, uncompromising characteristics of the Soriano brand, and how you guys are maintaining quality and still making sure that it provides a significant value to the end customer?
Very good. Our suppliers, and there are different tiers of suppliers that you got to any given vehicle you're building. I'll give you an example. Our motorcycle has approximately 2,000 parts. Now, that doesn't mean I have 2,000 suppliers, but I've a significant handful that I have to deal with when pre-ordering or putting in any type of purchase orders to do my whole line of assembly or production. When you have that many moving parts, the best strategy that we've found is, let's get married with our suppliers. And by so, I mean investing in them, apart from just using them as a service provider to yourself. So being part of their company shows them also trust that you believe in what they're doing, because these are also family offices. These are also family businesses in a sense. So you want to show them that sort of gratitude, but at the same support financially and socially. And that brings together satisfaction to them doing something for you. Because think about this, making a bolt for a motorcycle is not as exciting as putting it together. So you need to have a way of motivating, showing a final product to all these different line of suppliers that you've got and make them be a part of what your vision is. And in doing so, we'll promote always self-driven silos, mechanisms within the structure. And that's what we're doing, and we're doing it very well.
And I think we haven't covered it here, but in prior conversations, we talked about how you create incentive structures. And this goes to this notion of participating in a subsidiary and having some sort of an ownership context, and how that fundamentally changes from just a supplier mindset of, hey, I'm building a small, very subcomponent to I'm part of something bigger and I'm actually a part owner mindset. Don't forget to visit astorperkins.com to register for our next quarterly events. Past and current speakers include Julianne Hough, actress, dancer, and winner of Dancing with the Stars, Damian Vaughn, former NFL player, Neil Gregory, Chief Thought Leadership Officer at the IFC World Bank, and many more. To register, visit astorperkins.com and click on Events.
That's absolutely correct. So we incentivize by creating these subsidiaries, which are the subsidiaries that work with them directly as a client. And then at the same time, we become the distributor center to them. So I'll bring other brands, I'll bring other clients to the same fountain, of which they'll get a nice cut out of. So they become part owners of that subsidiary structure. And that's a big incentive because no brand out there does that for any supplier.
Now, you're in a very unique position because of your footprint in fashion, hospitality, motorcycles, general transportation, but also even wealth management. So there's a lot of touch points. And with that comes, I guess, a degree of, a responsibility, if that makes sense. So I'm curious as to how you think about sustainability and how is sustainability getting embedded into some of these business lines?
Sustainability of the businesses or the climate, where are we?
I think both sustainability of the business, which ultimately means that there's employment and jobs and economies, vibrant economies, but also in that process, thinking through the impact to the environment and other externalities.
Very good. And this is extremely important because this is kind of like impact investing. This is what people are calling it today. When you have pandemics, when you have issues of the sort, and we've seen all sorts of in the last 20 years, right? Starting with 9/11, transportation was disrupted all across the globe. New measures of security. Then it went on to moved on into other pandemics that weren't as global as the ones we had. We had the economic downturn, which was a financial crisis. Then we have more financial crises of micro regions throughout the world. Some of them are still in default. So what do you learn from this? You learn that the people that are working for you, first of all, are working for two reasons. One is necessity, because they need to work, they need to have a life, they need to make money and sustain for their families. And two, they do it out of loyalty. So you want to work with these two elements. One is emotional, psychological, and the other one is just the fact that these people are part of who you are. They're building things for you. So we like to, during a pandemic, help them as much as possible. There's always got to be reserves, capital on site, just in case something like this happens. And not be reliable on governments to tell you how you should be taking care of your own employees. That should be the responsibility of the directors, the executives of every company. Sustainability on the climate, on the other hand, is depending on the byproducts of what you're working with. Today, people are talking about zero gas emissions, which is not true. You are replacing that with batteries, and batteries must be produced, creating gas emissions regardless. They may be a little bit less, but you're not getting rid of it. So when I see names like zero green gas emissions thrown out in the market, to me, it's offensive almost, because it's not being transparent with the clients, with the government, what exactly we're doing here. Electrification is not something new. Electrification of vehicles took place in the early 1900s. It just never took off. If it wasn't for a company like Tesla that you saw on the market back in 2009, which was right at the same time of the economic downturn that we had, people thought this is the craziest thing to do right now. 10 years later, 15 years later, people are thinking, wow, this is the direction. And that's the sign that you've got from every major corporation conglomerate around the world. Everybody's going into this direction. Electricity is cheaper. It's about 1/5 to 1/8 of what you would spend in gasoline, diesel, or naphtha, or any derivative of crude oil. So we're heading in that direction. I think the next decade will create such important bridges throughout the world And we're seeing this in a lot of continents already. For example, Asia and Europe, in contrast to what the US has done so far, which is still much to be developed. So we look all across the picture to make sure that our social investment has an impact both positive in our people as well as the environment. We should all be responsible for that.
Agreed. So let me ask you kind of a profound philosophical question, which is let's say in your 90s, when you look back at your career as well as how you have stewarded the Soriano family group, what do you envision that to would look like, and how would you, in your opinion, indicate when you have achieved a certain success in your opinion? And then to add another layer of complexity is how, once you define that, how would your grandfather and great-grandfather perceive your success?
That's an excellent question. Me at 90 years old, looking back, and even today, I would try and go back in time and tell my younger self to avoid certain decisions, to avoid certain mistakes, and to be patient. I think in our younger years, most of us, we're very quick on our decisions. And sometimes we end up making mistakes and repeating the same mistakes that probably our parents or grandparents did too. Today, we have to be a lot more aware of what we say, how we act, how to be politically correct. People are this generation, and I notice this with our children, are extremely more sensitive to information. And that's part of it because of information being thrown at them from every single angle, right? Including social media, television, video games, and all this stuff. We didn't have that. So our approach, our way of looking at life was very narrow, and it was mostly coming directly from our parents. This generation can learn more from the internet than they can learn from you. And that we need to be extremely aware of when we're dealing with the next generations to come. When I look at myself, success to me, listen, I would like to be considered a role model to younger generations. I would like them to think of me as someone, holy cow, this guy really kept it together. He made his mistakes, but he's so transparent, so black and white in everything he does. That sort of stuff. And never lose sight that life is not just about work. Life is about really enjoying life for everything we have, which most of the time we end up taking for granted. And I always tell that to my children, that they should always try and enjoy life every day like there is no tomorrow. And I intend to do it myself on a daily basis. That to me is success. You have no family, what's the point? I don't know. That's my take.
Absolutely. All right. My last question for you is lessons learned in terms of when you look back, and even your predecessors, in terms of something that that was a key learning and that you want to share with others so that they can learn as well.
Sure. My predecessors were public figures that probably were more important people at the time than I am today. When I look at it, I learn about them from perspectives of different people rather than what I saw growing up, right? So I have two different personas for my dad, for my grandfather, for my uncles, even my own mom. And it all comes from different perspectives. What you have to really live with is that you were a son and they were a father and a mother, and they taught you something that is very valuable in life. Education. You have to be educated. 2, in order to be able to teach, you have to learn. So learn how to teach. It's a two-way communication. Listen as much as possible and be patient. So I would always remember these words because they were constantly thrown at me from my predecessors, as you call it, in respect, right? Respect when others are speaking. That's extremely important. And I will carry this on, and hopefully my children will carry that on to their children too as well.
So with that, I have been joined by Marco Antonio Soriano, the fourth, who is a partner and chief investment officer at the Soriano Group. Thank you for joining today.
Thank you.
If you've enjoyed this episode, take a moment to rate our show on any podcast platform that you listen to. Scroll down to the bottom and push 5 stars. It's that easy. And as always, thanks for listening.